and welcome to Wealth Talks, where we talk about solutions, money, and other things that create wealth in your life. And John, we've got 3 questions today that have been addressed to us, and we're going to take hold of those and answer them and give you resources to look at and hopefully go away with a full understanding of these questions.
That's right. So Mike writes in, he says, how about a little more information on how to receive benefits from life insurance during retirement? That's a big question that we get a lot. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Second question, also on the same topic, comes very close, a little bit more specific. It says, I have a topic for the podcast I'd love to hear. If you go down the email, he forwards an email to us. He says they're advertising how to get money from life insurance tax-free in retirement. He says, how much would you need in a policy or a system of policies to draw on in retirement and have $1,000 a month, $10,000 a month, or $30,000 a month? So he's looking for a ballpark so he could start planning accordingly.
Well, that's really important because, as we've talked about before, the accumulation of retirement funds is like taking an airplane off the ground. And just in a few minutes, we can teach anybody how to take an airplane off the ground. It's not very hard to do. The airplane was designed to fly itself, and it just pretty. You set the controls, you push the throttle, you sit, and pretty soon you're flying.
Yes.
However, when you start to bring that airplane down, there's a lot of things that has to go into the preparation of that, or you tail the wings off the plane or end up with yourself going nose first or stalling the plane out and spiraling to your death. So those are things that these questions are pertaining to. What do we need to have to get the plane, when we get the plane off the ground and are flying it, how high do we have to go? And then how do we come down from that altitude safely and securely?
Yes, those are important questions. And for a lot of people, this could mean the difference between having enough money in retirement or running out of money, which is the number one fear of most Americans today.
Yes, that's
not
true.
Something we want to face.
And, a lot of it has to do with the tax laws. And that's why tax-deferred plans have become so popular, because people believe they're tax-free. And yet there's consequences to not paying the taxes on growth.
You do pay the taxes sometime.
That we're going to see here in a little bit. And it's important for people to realize that when they start this flight of retirement planning, they need to prepare for the descent as well. Mm-hmm. And so, John, you've got some great numbers that you've worked here. And
yes.
And you've got a resource that people are going to be able to go to and type in their own numbers and see what they would like to have in retirement and what it would look like.
Yes. So the question that we're dealing with here that Mike and Derek wrote in about, really a couple different pieces to it. And there's a lot of variables that go into it. The main question is, how much do we need in policies in order to be able to get sustainable passive income, and what does that look like?
Yes.
To address that, we also need to look at the question, well, how much would you need in other types of investments?
Well, absolutely. Without a comparison, you're not really doing anything.
We have to compare.
And we have to look at, too, is it even reasonable, some of the ideas that people have, well, I want to have this in retirement. Is it even reasonable that they're going to be able to collect that much money in the flight for retirement plans?
Sure. And so we have to look, how much would you need, and then how much would you need to save to get there? So that's where it comes into putting it into action. So some of the variables that we have to think about are, this is going to be a little bit different for people depending on their age, their health, and it can also be a little bit different based on the company.
Oh, sure.
The insurance company that we're looking at when we're thinking about policy, because part of this factor is the dividends, the profit of the company. If we're looking out, projecting that long, if we're going to assume the market's going to do a certain thing, we have to look at what the insurance company is projecting to do as well.
So let's look at someone that is used to living on about $360,000 a year, and they are wanting $30,000 a month, let's say, to retire on. What kind of accumulation are they going to have in order for that to become a reality for them?
In order for that to become a reality, okay, so $360,000 a year, that's $30,000 a month, which is the question that came in from Derek. If we're looking at other types of investments, then according to recent research on sustainable withdrawal rates by Dr. Wade Pfau,
Yes.
you need between almost 17 million and a little over $23 million.
By the way, it's not just Wade Pfau, it's Morningstar and some other financial groups too that have realized that the 4% withdrawal rate the Monte Carlo formula gave us is inaccurate and unsustainable anymore.
Yeah, it
and
is.
so that's why these new research is out. And, for a 10% failure rate with a risk of failing 10% time, what is someone going to be able to withdraw from their account and have this $360,000 income, John?
So with a 10% failure rate and looking out 30 to 40 years, the withdrawal rate that's sustainable, according to this latest research, is like 1.5% to just over 2%.
So that means I have to have a lot of money accumulated if I'm only going to be able to take 1.5% of that.
You do. And that's
without having the fear of running out of money.
That's why we're looking at $23 million for that.
$23 million. Now, how likely is that going to happen for someone making $350,000 a year right now?
Yeah, it might be a little tough.
It might be really tough.
But, if they're getting $360,000 in passive income in retirement, maybe they're making more than that for that type of person. So the second step then is we look at, how much would you need in life insurance policy to make this happen? We ran a policy with one of the companies that we represent on a 25-year-old in good health. Obviously, this would be different for, depending on age and health, but it accumulates $13.3 million, almost $13.4 million by age 70.
So let's just stop here for a second. So this 25-year-old could have been contributing into his investment portfolio, and he would have had to accumulate $23 million by the time he retires.
Yeah, 70 years old.
To have an income of $360,000 a year.
Correct.
Or he could buy life insurance starting when he's 25, and he only has to accumulate $13 million to have that same income?
13.4 million in cash value.
That's $10 million less.
Quite a bit less, yeah.
Now, why is that happening, John?
That's happening because the life insurance policy continues growing. And, the qualified plan might too, but there's not as many unknown factors.
Okay.
Such as you have with other investments. Not as much market exposure.
That's true. And of course, we're talking about getting tax-free money from the policy, and this income over here is probably going to be taxed either capital gains or income, one of the two, because it's not in a first-in, first-out type policy investment.
Yeah. And obviously, you could take more than $360,000 a year from this your other investments, and maybe it would work.
But you risk the failure rate way higher.
Quite a bit higher.
So now it's not a 10% possibility of a failure rate. It maybe goes up to 40 or even 60% that you're going to run out of money before you die.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah,
and,
that makes sense.
And with here, we're just depending on what the insurance company, the profits of the insurance company have been doing. And it can't go lower. We can't lose money in the insurance policy like you can in the market. So that risk of failure is not as high.
So another way to look at this is to say, okay, you got $23 million here, and to guarantee that you're going to have $360,000 every year for the rest of your life, you can only take 1.5% of that. Yep. Whereas if you have $13 million accumulated in a life insurance policy and you want $360,000 for the rest of your life, you can take 2.6, almost 2.7% of what you've accumulated, and you won't run out of money simply because we're working with the surety and the stability of an insurance company rather than the volatility of the market.
Exactly.
That's so amazing.
So we looked at this over a few different examples. And, for taking a lower income amount, maybe a lower premium amount on the policy, you can get, we looked at amounts for $10,000 a month of income, for $1,000 a month of income. The withdrawal rate based on the cash value at age 70 was somewhere between 2.7 and about 3.5% along the way. So it means less money that you have to come up with along the way. And for those of you listening to this podcast, go to our website, and there's a Retirement Remastered article. We'll put the link in the podcast resources for this episode. You'll be able to click and go right to it. About a third to halfway down the page, there is a calculator that you can download. It's called the Withdrawal Projections. You can put in your own numbers, a desired income amount or the amount of assets that you'll have, and see what type of withdrawal rate. Put in the different rates and see how much assets you're going to
It's going to show you how much you're going to need, and it's going to show you the risk levels there that you can take if you want to have a higher risk of 40 or maybe 60% of running out of money earlier.
Yes.
Or you can stay in a more stable position. Now, John, if this you ran those numbers on someone that's getting $10,000 a month in retirement, and they're going to have really close to $8 million saved up in traditional retirement planning methods if they're going to have that $120,000 and not run the risk of running out of money. So how much do they have to have saved in a life insurance policy if they want to have $10,000 a month?
Pulling that up right now here. The 25-year-old for a $10,000 a month income, we had just over $4 million.
Wow.
So it's quite a little bit less there.
So almost half the accumulation required, and you can take out nearly double the percentage. Yep. Because you can take up about 3% versus 1.5%.
And that's just the policy. We can take it beyond this now, because even 3%, let's face it, that may not be enough for some people that are getting started late in the game,
sure,
or don't have enough savings to come up to $4 million of assets.
Sure,
we do have some other options when we're using the life insurance, don't we?
But we're coming a lot closer to that 4% that the Monte Carlo model was based on. So let's see, can we do better than that?
We can.
I thought so.
You see, with the policy, we have something else that we don't have with any other type of investment. That is the death benefit. For years, financial planners have said you won't need the death benefit. Your family won't need the death benefit after age 65 or 70, whenever you retire. Right?
Well, that's the mantra of Dave Ramsey, isn't it?
It's too bad. Turns out the death benefit has some real useful value here.
It sure does. On this
$10,000 a month income example we were looking at, the death benefit by the time this gentleman gets to age 70 is about just shy of $6.8 million.
Wow.
So let's consider an example here. Let's say that let's say he has this spread across multiple policies.
Okay.
So he has $4 million in cash value on this example that we ran, but let's say he had this spread across $1 million per policy.
Mm-hmm.
He could roll one of those, the value of one of those, to an annuity and get guaranteed income for life.
Oh, wow.
Now,
yes, certainly you could.
We don't usually recommend annuities. Why not?
Well, an annuity is good the older you get.
Yes.
Because the older you get, the higher the payout is going to be, because now the mortality credits are working really, really well for you.
Yeah,
because
it's almost like reverse life insurance when you get to that point.
It is.
It takes your life expectancy, it works with a chunk of assets, and it gives you an income from it.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like very, very similar to reverse life insurance. So if we take that $1 million on a 69-year-old, start payments 1 year later, income payments when he's 70, then that would create an annuity payout amount of $78,000 per year, guaranteed. He can't ever outlive. You figure out the percentage on that, it's almost an 8% withdrawal rate, 7.82%.
Oh my goodness! Now that's
we just
huge.
Changed the picture there. And the downside of annuities, when he rolls that $1 million, if he died tomorrow, that $1 million would be gone. That wouldn't work for most people's planning. But with the death benefit and the other life insurance policies, it can work.
Well, and he doesn't have to just have an annuity on his own life. He could have a joint annuity with his children if his wife is gone or her husband is gone.
And that will lower the payment amount.
It'll lower the income amount, but it makes sure that money is just not going to disappear in thin air when they die on an annuity.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. Certainly. And always when we're talking about annuities, usually it's best to wait as long as possible before you start an annuity, because the older you get, the better the payout.
Otherwise, it ties that money up and prohibits you from using it and keeping it liquid, like we talk about in the perpetual wealth code all the time.
Yes. And in this example that we're talking about, the gentleman still has money in cash values in his policy that he could access for other expenses like health care that are often big, unexpected expenses in retirement. Mm-hmm. So that's good to keep in mind. One thing that people are often concerned about when you talk about annuity is, well, am I going to get my money back? So, we roll $1 million to an annuity. So if we look at the life expectancy for U.S. people in the United States, this was a chart published by the CDC in 2014. I will include the link to it in the resources for this podcast. Life expectancy for 70-year-olds male and female together. It does break it down in the chart if you want to take a look at that. 15.7 years.
So that they're roughly saying they're going to live to about 86.
Right.
If they're healthy at age 70, they've got about another 16 years to go.
That's right. And so let's take the amount of income that they're getting out of the annuity, $78,000, multiply it by 15.7. If they live to their life expectancy, they will receive over $1 million back out in income. In this case, it's $1.23 million more. And if they live longer than that, who cares? They can never worry about outliving that money.
That's true.
Which is the great thing about the peace of mind
with an annuity
that option gives you. So what options could we maybe use this in?
Oh, there's just untold ways that you can do that. But some of them are, let's say that we're a business owner.
Sure.
And we got a piece of property but we really don't want to face the capital gains tax on the sale of that business. How could we maybe avoid that? Because something that Jack Bogle says in his book Don't Count on It, it says that while there's no escaping inflation, that's the insidious tax that affects us all, it is easily possible to reduce both investment costs, the fees and penalties, and that's why we use life insurance and annuities, and the taxes almost to the point that they vanish. Now, that's pretty cool. Because when we think that, there's so much money going to fees and to taxes, how can we make those vanish? Well, we talk about that in the Perpetual Wealth Code and why we use life insurance to do that. But now we're at the end of the accumulation phase in life and we're trying to land the plane. So how maybe could we liquidate a business and not have to pay the taxes that are going to be
tax
paid
on it? Well, there's such a thing called a structured installment sale. Most people don't like to get paid over time for a business because now you're taking a risk on the buyer having the resources and the credit worthiness to repay you over time. How do you know if they're not going to run the business you just sold them into the ground? It's a possibility. You don't want to run that risk. So that's where such a thing such as a structured installment sale can come in. Where the buyer makes the payment for the business to an insurance company or maybe to a trust company in some cases, and they pay you, the seller, over time. So you only pay the taxes then as you receive the money. It's a nice way to avoid that 1-year tax hit.
That's huge.
But you don't have to take the risk of the buyer paying you back.
Yes. So if a buyer wants to buy the property outright, they could put that money into a trust fund that then pays a premium on a life insurance policy or maybe even an annuity, and then that can gradually come to the seller. And over a period of time, and especially if it's in life insurance, we've got a product that's not taxable. Exactly. And so that's one of the ways to make things vanish. So taxes vanish.
Another way is for a typical employee, non-business owner, who has had a 401k with an employer match for all of their years. Maybe they contribute enough to that 401k to get the employer match. Makes the employer match more effective, dollar for dollar that went into the plan. They didn't lose access to more of their money than they had to, but they've started life insurance along the way as well. So they have both now when they get to retirement. Well, they could take the assets in the 401k, roll those to an annuity. They'll still pay taxes on the income as they receive it, just like if they took it from the 401k. But the death benefit in the life insurance covers those assets. If they died tomorrow, their heirs wouldn't be out of pocket.
Sure.
Okay. They still have the cash value in the life insurance as well. So it gives another tool to plan with, more options.
Certainly. And if they do die, it gives them the opportunity to have a death benefit to perpetuate the income for their spouse.
Yes.
Or for maybe dependents or even for a charity or something else like that, because we talked about the annuities being used earlier.
Or like we discussed earlier, if they really, really need the income, they got started so late in the game, we're short of funds, then they could even roll the value in the life insurance policy, the cash value, to an annuity at some future point.
Sure. So it locks it in and guarantees it.
Exactly. And we have a couple examples on this that we have outlined in the retirement article on our website. We'll include the link here in the podcast for you, but that gives you some information. Now, talking about annuities here, Zane writes in. He says, I'm self-employed, I have low overhead. I'm also very interested in tax breaks. Someone mentioned that a tax-deferred, non-qualified annuity would be an option. Now, to give you a little bit of perspective, this is a younger guy writing in.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't necessarily annuity be a good option for him right now?
Well, right now, interest rates on annuities are relatively low.
Yes.
Simply because we've been in a low interest environment since the dot-com bubble. And so the fact that he's got a long life in front of him, most likely, actuarially he does, whether he meets those actuary tables or not,
sure,
then it's not going to be, that compounding growth is not going to be as great as if he accumulates that money someplace else. And then when he needs a guaranteed income to roll the cash he's accumulated into an annuity at that point.
Yeah, there we go.
Again, he's deferring. This is a deferred annuity. And if he pays for that with money that he's looking for a tax break too. So if he could buy an annuity inside his self-directed IRA and not pay taxes on it. But then, all that's doing is guaranteeing that the money will be there for him.
Yeah.
Whereas if he would roll that into a life insurance policy instead and pay the taxes today, he would have a much greater gain by taking the cash values and rolling it into an annuity at that point, because he's taking money that's not going to pay taxes again now.
Yeah.
And he will have a higher payout in the end.
Yes. And so for someone using a combination of annuities, that's really hard to design ahead of time. If we're trying to work backwards from how much income you want to, how much you would need in life insurance right now. If we're going to use annuities too, that kind of changes the rule of the game. You would probably need even less. And that's something we have to work out on a case-by-case basis.
It can, and we've run into quite a number of clients who bought annuities as they were working in their life. But interest rates were really high at that time. That's when prime was 21%, and they were getting like 10 and 12 and 16% on these annuities.
Yeah.
And it was a great guaranteed place for them to do that. Although I will say that even at that point, they could have put a whole lot more money in life insurance during that time period too, because there wasn't the MEC rules at that point, and they could have dumped a huge ton. So all in all, while we're in our working career and in relatively good health, it makes sense to buy the life insurance.
Yes.
Now, if Zane, for example, has poor health and can't get life insurance on his life, then maybe an annuity makes sense, because annuity don't really take into consideration what kind of health you have, whereas life insurance does.
True. Not as much. And something too with annuities is you can't really access the money without tax.
That's true.
Even in a non-qualified annuity, where the growth is tax deferred, if you go to access the money, you take money out of the earnings first, so you pay taxes on those.
And you usually pay penalties if you're trying to get money out of it before it annuitizes.
Right. And so the life insurance in that respect is a whole lot better vehicle to be using.
That's correct.
So that gives some options. In the retirement article, we have a couple videos that go through different examples of how this can work. And if you need some help with your own numbers, contact us at 702-660-7000. We'll be happy to help.
So, John, before we move on and finish this podcast, let's talk a little about two rules called LIFO and FIFO. And that's an acronym for last in, first out, and first in, first out. So LIFO and FIFO. And those laws were made effective in 1988 under the fact that the IRS was trying to contain the interest that people could defer and not have to pay. And so can you talk a little bit more about those?
So that annuity that we just mentioned, if you were going to access the money, let's assume there was no penalty to access the money. You take the money out, but you have to take the earnings first. The money that last went in, the earnings.
So the growth
has to come out first, which means you pay taxes on it right away.
So that's very much like accessing your 401k.
Yes.
Or
even a Roth. Or
not a Roth.
Not really Roth, because you don't have to take it.
But an IRA.
Yes. Okay. Any type of non-qualified plan.
So when we do that, if we're with a qualified plan, if we do that before we're 59 and a half, we also pay a penalty.
Yes.
Whereas with an annuity, there may be or may not be a penalty, depending on how the contract's written.
Mm-hmm.
But the taxes will always be due on the growth, and you're forced to take the growth first when you take a withdrawal from it.
Yes, that's right. With life insurance is first in, first out. It's different.
Much different.
What that means is you can withdraw everything that you ever paid in premiums.
And there's no
tax. That comes out first. The money that first went in is the first money to come out. You already paid taxes on that money.
Yes.
No more taxes due.
Yes.
Until you start going into the part that grew above the money that you ever paid in premiums.
And then, of course, we would like to do loans, so it's not taxable anyway. And
that's what we did on the examples that we discussed here. We switched to loans at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's the best option. Sometimes it isn't because of the policy loan interest.
Sure.
You have to look at that. And so that's the other option where the annuity can come in handy. Maybe you take withdrawals all the way up to the cost basis, roll it to the annuity, and then you pay taxes as you receive that.
And of course, the dividends make a big difference at that point too, because if dividends are high enough, they can defer or actually cover the cost of interest on loans for a number of years. Can certainly offset it.
Sure.
Maybe not 100%, but so that makes a lot of sense to realize that life insurance. We, number one, have to have less accumulated to get the same income from other types of investments for retirement.
Right.
And we're not taxed on the money for early usage if we borrow from a life insurance policy. And we can avoid taxes if we borrow from it. And we could withdraw up to what we've paid for the policy without ever facing taxes. Whereas if we're looking at other types of accumulations for retirement, if we access that, we may face a penalty if we're not a certain age, or we're not abiding by the contract if it's annuity, and we're going to face taxes on that. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have to have, one of the reasons why we have to have so much more accumulated.
Yes.
And even then, we can take a lower distribution rate to keep us from running out of money in our lifetime versus what we can take out of the life insurance. This is such a no-brainer when you sit down and look at it.
Yeah, and the takeaway for those of you listening to this, even if some of the terms that we've talked about today are unfamiliar, the takeaway is you have a whole lot more options with the life insurance.
And that's really important because none of us knows what's going to happen when you turn 70. Yeah. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow for sure.
We don't. Yeah,
but that's why we want to work with these options that you can keep right there in front of you until you are forced to make the decision due to circumstances in your life. Yeah. If we narrow it down today when you're younger, and we don't know how that's going to penalize you in the future.
Exactly.
And or how much more you're going to have to save because you made the wrong choice today. There's a lot of difference between 23 million, John, and 13 million.
Oh, there sure is.
That's almost double.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for going through these numbers because I know this takes a lot of math and detail, but please do go to the link that we're going to have on the website and type in your own desired income in retirement, put your risk factor in there, and go ahead and see how much you have to accumulate in a traditional finance account and see how much, and then give us a call and we'll happily show you how much you would have to have in a life insurance policy to accumulate to match that same income.
Yes. Exactly. So that'll be great. For those of you, we appreciate you writing in for topic ideas on the podcast. Thanks to Mike, Derek, and Zane who wrote in for this podcast. We encourage you to write in with your topics. Please send me an email, John, John, at life-benefits.com. You can also call us at 702-660-7000. We really appreciate your input on that.
And John, we have something kind of exciting coming up. It's called the Wealth Summit. It's our last 3-day Wealth Summit that we're going to host. It's our 7th one. And we are going to be doing a live podcast during that Wealth Summit. And the audience is going to be able to participate with their questions. So if you're not registered and you want to be part of that live podcast and you have a question that's just burning that you got to get answered, please go to our the Wealth Summit. What's the webpage?
Yeah, wealthsummit.net has all the details for the event. You will want to get registered. People have told us to be sure that everyone knows to use the hotel room rate. They've tried to register without it. The rates are quite a little bit more. Evidently, the hotel had a lot of traffic coming in at that time, so they have raised the rates for October. So you want to be sure and use that special room rate.
And do not let the hotel tell you there's not a room for you, because oftentimes the hotel does that so that they can charge you the higher rate, and then they turn around and penalize us and charge us as well. So there are rooms blocked available for you at a very good rate. So make sure that if you have an issue with the hotel room rate, you let us know.
That's right. So more on this will be coming up at the Wealth Summit. I'm going to be presenting on some passive income options during retirement involving life insurance policies at the Wealth Summit. We're also going to have Jack Cohen speaking there, who's a former IRS auditor who'll be sharing some tax perspective.
Yes, he's going to be talking this year about what the state taxes, income and property taxes, are, how that's changing your federal tax return this year, which is really critical. It's information that you have to know. Otherwise, you could end up facing a huge federal tax liability this year.
All right. So until next week, we'll be back here on Wealth Talks to talk about solutions, money, and other things that create wealth in your life. Have a great week.